Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
Hey y'all, I'm Casey Bell from the Shake Up Learning Show, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and today I have with me Matt Rhoads, and we're going to be talking about all things edtech and all things special ed. So we might be geeking out a little bit here during this conversation, friends. I am so excited to welcome you to the show, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking about this. It's just, the times that we're in, it's just so important to integrate, technology in everything that we are doing to hopefully, amplify the learning of our students, as well as make, and when we're speaking of special education, case management, writing IEPs, and making sure everything, your data is all really sound, and just looking forward to, geeking out with you a little bit about this so we can help some teachers.
For sure. Let's jump right into your teaching story, Matt. So what brought you into education, and how has that journey led you to where you are today?
So it's funny that when I tell this story is that I actually got my undergraduate in political science. I went to law school for a little bit.
Okay, that was a twist.
Yeah, so ultimately after a semester, I did not really enjoy it. I was kind of burnt out, and I just felt like this wasn't something that was fulfilling to me. So I left law school, and I always knew that I liked working with people and teaching because I always led tutoring groups in college, and I did some tutoring on the side through my undergrad. And eventually I felt, hey, I want to go into education. And I started a credentialing program and a master's program with single subject credentials as well as special education. And I was told that jumping into teaching at the time, that, having these credentials would help you get in the door in a very competitive San Diego market. So that's kind of just a little bit of the story, but I've always liked working with all types of students, neurodiverse students, and just someone personally, for a time in elementary school, I had an IEP, definitely was able to exit eventually when I was in late elementary school. So it's definitely, working with students with special needs was like personal to me as someone that was in elementary school that had an IEP. So I definitely just wanted to, go into a profession and, help support students that may have been going through some of the same struggles I have been going through, and just to help create solutions for, students and families. So that was just kind of the main driver of going into education. And thereafter, about 4 years after I started teaching, I received my doctorate in education and focused a lot on data literacy and using data to drive our instructional decision making. So spent a lot of time researching and studying that, and that comes from the special ed side of things because we want data to drive our RAPs, and we realized that the data literacy amongst teachers and school leaders was something that we need to improve, and so that is kind of what manifested there. So I've always had a love for technology, always have had a blended learning classroom. When I started teaching, everything was pretty much digital. In basically 2 years, we went to about basically 90% paperless. So it was something that just I implemented from the get-go in my career and just continued that onwards. And when COVID hit, I was focusing a lot on my data literacy work, and then we kind of had to go into emergency instruction, and I just took a lot of things that I've learned from having a blended learning environment in my classroom and taking a lot of the instructional strategies and integrating it with tech tools. And I just, not only just want to help my school and my district, but, definitely, started writing a lot about it and talking a lot about it. So just trying to support not only just my backyard, but, regionally and throughout the United States.
Right, of course. Your journey took lots of twists and turns. We started in law school for a hot minute, and then we moved into working with students. And I love how you shared at the beginning that you had an IEP and you tested out of special ed. I think that's something important for our listeners to know, that you can test out of special education. You can go in and out of it, and as long as your long as your needs are being met, you can be successful. And I think
Definitely.
That's really cool that you shared that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And for me at least, in terms of learning, I was more of a late bloomer. I feel like it was in third and fourth grade is really when things started to click. I really struggled in school for the first few years. And I had a couple really, good teachers that, I don't know what really they did, but I know, just for example, just one believed in me, and just the light bulbs went off in my head, and I was able to finally understand things. I remember just looking at, for example, just like a worksheet when I was in second, third grade. I just had no idea like what to do. I was super confused and having that feeling. But then when I went to fourth grade, something happened where I was like, oh, I understand everything now. So everyone learns at different speeds and different times of their life. So it's just important for everyone to note that, and just when you're working with students, and it could be across different types of skills and content as well.
Yes, thank you so much for pointing that out. So let's get into the meat of our content today. So we're going to be talking about instructional strategies and edtech. So instructional strategies and edtech, how do these go together? What are they, and how do they go together for our future teachers to learn more about, implementing these instructional strategies alongside our educational technology tools?
Yeah, so instructional strategies come from cognitive science, neuroscience, of really essentially how people learn, and what are some actions that we can take in our classroom for our students to, help them learn. So you take that strategy and incorporate it, whether it's in a task or assignment or sequence of tasks. And, through those strategies, it helps you learn. So I think the easiest one that I think many new teachers may know about is think, pair, share, or
that was in my head. That quickly came to my head. Yes.
That's like the really like beginning strategy. And we can take that, for example, think, pair, share with interactive slides, whether it's a Google slide, or we can do it with Pear Deck, Nearpod, Mentimeter nowadays, and have that overt and covert learning take place in an active learning sense. And then whether we're in person or whether we're online, we can have our students, turn and talk, and then we can share out to the rest of the class, whether it's through a digital bulletin board or whether it's verbally. We can do both. And or we could do it online, and we have our students share in a breakout room together, and then we come back and do a similar type of share out, whether we have a summary of the responses, and you have a number of students read through them or talk about them, or you just have them listed there and they read through them. So that's just a really basic strategy that we can do that can help students learn. And others include reciprocal teaching, concept mapping, types of formative feedback, action feedback. So you provide student feedback, but you need to have them complete an action as a result of that feedback. Retrieval practice, space versus mass practice. So those are all types of strategies that we can integrate using tools as a delivery method.
Ooh, I like how you started with the strategy first.
Yep.
And then went to the ed tech, because that's the way we got to think about it, right?
Yeah, the pedagogy and strategy drives our use in tech, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so important. Can you repeat that for the ones in the back?
Yeah, so our instructional strategies and pedagogy drive the use of tech, not the other way around, because as we all know, a lot of times the strategies don't change, but the tech does.
Yes.
So that's really important to note. And when we're selecting ed tech tools, we need to think about the strategy and how does the strategy look conceptually? And then we can think about, all right, how can we use these tools to deliver the strategy?
Right. It kind of reminds me of baking cookies. Like you're never going to bake cookies without some core ingredients, right? Think of those as the instructional strategies: the butter, the flour, the sugar, and then like the ed tech could be, do you want to add chocolate chips or like peanut butter chips or something fun like that? Those are the things that change, but they support that instructional strategy, or the regular cookie, if you want to
Yes,
say.
exactly.
Can you tell I haven't had lunch yet?
No, you're ready for a snack.
I know, right? All right, Matt, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. So, what are some best practices besides the obvious one, which we're using instructional strategies to drive the ed tech? What are some other good practices when we're thinking about infusing instructional strategies and educational technology?
So I think that, we could go and use the SAMR model, for example. But that, I feel like that is a little bit over years, and I like to kind of break it down in a simpler way, is that we simply don't want to just augment what we're doing. We want to, pragmatically think like, hey, what does this strategy do? For example, retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is where, for example, we take something from our long-term memory to short-term memory and there and back. And for example, we can do that with flashcards, right? So we have a vocabulary word or a mathematical problem set or concept. And then on the other end, we have the answer. And, the cards can help, but also think about, we can do retrieval practice on a mass scale through gamification. For example, like we use like quizzes or Quizlet as a way to gamify our practice on an individual level or as an entire class. And we can incorporate principles of universal design for learning within our tech. So, for example, we can provide like visuals, graphics, memes that relate to that concept. So we can really change things up to, personalize it for the students that we serve so that, we can meet them in their strengths. So that's kind of a way that I like to think about just for for when I think about retrieval practice. We can use technology to essentially allow for a practice like UDL to, manifest itself to help students remember certain concepts or to, practice memorization or, that type of strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now let's press a little bit more on UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the universal design for learning is broken down into a number of basically 4 categories. So I think the biggest thing for me is that you can break down the learning into different modalities. So, for example, we have multiple areas of representation. So, like, how can we represent different types of like language, symbols, and how can we represent comprehension? And then also when we're thinking about like engagement, there's a lot of different things that we can do for engagement to, have our students have that continuing interest or that continued sustained effort and persistence, as well as self-regulation. So, and then, action expression, and I like to think about it is, executive functions, expression, communication, and physical action. I like the physical action piece the most within that piece because you have your students create something. So let me just break it down just really simply now is that we want to do something that can continue to have our students be engaged in a task that can be represented through different types of modalities, and that students can create something that's authentic and can communicate their learning to you. So that's kind of my idea of like when I'm breaking down UDL, and we can think about how we can do that say, for example, on using the jigsaw technique. I like to take a different type of level of text, different lexile levels, and maybe, there's different types of reading levels in there. And I can break down maybe one or two different types of stories for my students, and I could break them into groups of maybe interest. Maybe students want to read a story about this at this level, and students want to read a different type of story, but it's on the same type of concept that we can talk about. And then we can put them in a group of students that we feel like that can bolster the strengths of others. And then, for example, the representation piece, maybe in the jigsaw, we're doing it on an interactive slide like Pear Deck, where they have the immersive reader as well as the ability to annotate, and we can create some protocols for students of how to annotate. And then at the very end, after they've annotated and talked a little bit about the story, then we provide them an opportunity. Maybe you want them to do a short little story illustration, or you give them the choice to record their own summary or their own commentary of the story. Or we can have a different type of group discussion. We can have a short little seminar. So, there's a lot of different ways that we can do it, but that's just an example of, putting that UDL in action with an interactive slide and using a story for helping students understand and read.
Right. And I love how you just, sprinkled in some ed tech as you shared those strategies. And I think, that's super important to remember. The ed tech supports that strategy. So I think this conversation about UDL really blends nicely into our next topic, which is helping students with special needs in your classroom. And one area that all teachers need to do when supporting students with special needs in their classroom is to track the data, progress monitor, all those good fun words. But we know that data sounds a little daunting, right? So let's talk about it. What are some best practices when it comes to preparing to take data? What kind of data should we be taking? Where do we look to find what data we should be taking? Tell us all the things, Matt.
Yeah, so first we have to look at the student's IEP and goals. So generally speaking, it depends on the type of environment you're in. If you're an elementary teacher and you see your students often, then a lot of students probably have, a reading, writing, and math goal. And you want to put your students in a position where, they're able to, you're able to collect that data, but at the same time, you want to make your life somewhat easier, because if you have like 20 different students and they're doing 20 different things to collect that data, then that's unsustainable and you won't be able to do that. So I like to, for example, use a tool like iReady as a way for me to collect data and individualize lessons. And then what I do is I collect data using a tool like iReady, in different types of intervals. And then I like to then have my mini lessons with students, whether it's in a small group or, whole class instruction. Then we progress monitor by looking at the iReady data, whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever the interval is. And then what's great about a platform like iReady, MobyMax, etc., or Freckle, you can get that data spreadsheet for those, those academic gains, and you can individualize, the types of assessments and also some of the adaptive learning modules for students. So what's great is that you can get that data, exported, and you can easily put that into an IEP, and you can get visualizations for that as well and give that to parents. You can send an email to the parents about like, hey, how's Johnny doing in multiplying fractions or in writing declarative sentences? You can break it down into those various skill areas. So I like to use that as a way to interval. But also when you're thinking about behavior, that behavior or like that social emotional learning, when you are individually trying to take that data for students, I think that's actually the most hard versus the academic piece, because we have the tools now where we can collect that data quite easily. So I like to have a Google form that I have out that has a number of things I'm looking for various students, and throughout the day, it's like about 3 to 5 questions, and I like to just input that data, and then I have an ongoing spreadsheet where I can take a look at that data and use that to report on IEP goals, as well as communicate with the service providers and stakeholders. So that's another strategy that I like to do, especially when it's those types of goals. Or you can even have an executive functioning goal where you're collecting that type of data using that type of like a form.
And I love how with those Google Forms, we can use them as teachers, but also our students can use them as self-reflexive tools for self-regulation.
Yeah.
And, going into observe student teacher, something we both do, we can see those types of forms used daily with lots of different students. How are my emotions today, to all the way to, working on self-regulating your emotions, but also those executive functioning skills, tracking what homework you have, how are you going to organize that, time management, scheduling, all those types of skills to help our students. And these are things that we can do with paper, with printouts, or digitally with our students.
Yeah, no, I like to, for example, have an SEL check-in right at the beginning of class using an interactive slide. I mean, like a Pear Deck, and they're able to draw what their emotion is, and then I give them an opportunity to like articulate how they're feeling, and then we have another opportunity where they're I'd like them to summarize 1 or 2 classroom routines. So that we can, remember what we are needing to do that day. And then at the very end of the lesson, I like to provide that metacognition and reflection piece. Like, describe what you learned. What did you feel like you did well? Where can we improve? And to me, that really helps. And I'm able to see kind of at the very end of the lesson, how's everyone doing? And do that, based on their own perception, did they understand what we were doing?
Right. I loved starting off with an SEL. And, that's something that we can do pre-K through our adult learners.
Yes.
One of my favorite ones over on Pear Deck is what's filling your bucket and what's emptying your bucket.
Oh, I love that
one. I think it's so telling. You might have to explain for our young learners what that means, or maybe use a different graphic. But now, Matt, we're jumping around a little bit here, but you had mentioned a document called an IEP, an Individualized Education Plan, which you shared about some goals are in there, some adaptations are in there. What are some qualities of a well-written IEP that we can share with our listeners today?
So I think running a defensible IEP means is that there's data to back everything within IEP, from the services to the goals to really the present levels. You have all the data there that guides the IEP, and just making sure that your data is accurate and represents what's happening in IEP, and making it really readable to anyone, because IEPs, if I'm looking at IEP versus a parent versus assistant principal, we need to have that common language. So having that common language as well is important too. I think just having data to back everything you are, making sure it's clear for all variety of different types of readers, and that you're taking your time, but at the same time you want to make your IEPs in terms of like how they're read, more uniform, with obviously the individualized data and what's going on, but so that you, as well as everyone that you're working with, can be on the same page as to what are we talking about here, and how can we input that information to make this something that is a document everyone can understand, and that it's it's a defensible IEP.
And I love how you said using a common language, from administrator to teacher to parent to support specialist. Everyone's using that common language.
Yes.
And you shared about, having data to back up your information in the IEP. And, you can go back and rewind the different data strategies that Matt had shared earlier in the episode. But Matt, I would love for you to take some time here to share some of the work that you are doing and how my listeners can connect with you, because we are just scratching the surface here, friends. I know, Matt has some great resources for y'all to check out and, to dig a little bit deeper on these topics.
Yeah, so I just had a book come out called Navigating the Toggle Term, a guide for K-12 classroom and school leaders, which is a book about navigating, the present and future of education, where, basically the classroom is without boundaries now, and learning can take place anywhere, anytime, and just preparing our teachers now, whether they're, a veteran, novice, or a pre-service teacher, that, we need to be able to teach anywhere at any time. So it provides that framework, goes over instructional strategies integrated with edtech. There's 3 chapters on special education, navigating differentiating instruction, IEP meetings, as well as collecting that data, everything that I talked about here, communicating, engaging with the community and students, as well as just organizational frameworks that can help, school leaders, navigate, the ever-changing conditions that we're in. And what's great is that there's 13 different case studies from teachers and school leaders throughout the United States that describe kind of how to put the themes and strategies in the chapter into action. These are real-life educators that are doing it. So I feel like that's really powerful. And then I have a couple other projects. Right before I got on with you today, I was editing a book for a book series I'm coming out with EduMatch in about...
Love EduMatch!
Yes. And that one's all about integrating instructional strategies with edtech, but we took educators from across the globe to write about what they're doing in their classrooms.
Sweet.
So that's really exciting. And have another book with them as well. And then I have a podcast, Navigating Education, the podcast, where we have guests from all different walks of education. And we talk about how to navigate, our current times as well as the future. And then I write on my blog at matthewrhoads.com all about kind of just what we're talking about, as well as about data and all those really fun topics. So I really hope that you can check me out and take a listen to the podcast as well. But I appreciate you so much for having me on today.
Thank you. And Matt, really quick, can you share where we can purchase your book?
Yeah, so you can go on Amazon to purchase the book. You can, if you're an international listener, you can go to my website at matthewrhoads.com, and there's a ton of different international book retailers. If you live, for example, in the UK or in EU, Australia, Canada, if you don't have access to Amazon, there are a ton of distributors that we have. So there's a lot of different places to pick up the book.
Perfect. Awesome. And we look forward to those additional titles, hopefully later on in the year. We can check those out from EduMatch.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.